very welcome to the latest episode of the South Tip Arts podcast. In this episode, I will be catching up with Ed Devane, whose exhibition Presence is currently on display here at the gallery in South Tip Arts Centre until August 20th. We were once again delighted to partner with the ScienceJunction Arts Festival to present Presence, a system of interactive sounding objects created by Ed, especially for... We were delighted to once again partner with ScienceJunction Arts Festival to present Presence, which consists of 3 new sound sculptures by Ed that interact with visitors through mechanical and electronic means to create sequences of musical sounds. Ed Devane is a sound artist and instrument designer based in Donegal. Beginning his creative career as an electronic music producer, his work has broadened over the years to include interactive installation, electronic instrument design, community projects, and workshop facilitation relating to music and sound. Much of the inspiration behind his installation work is to use technology and instrument building to encourage creative encounters and collaborations between participants. Ed has recently produced installations for the Science Gallery in Dublin, the Arc, Galway City of Culture 2020, the Big Bang Festival and Science Foundation Ireland, and he recently hosted 2 workshops with us here at the Arts Centre as part of the Junction Festival. I caught up with Ed via Zoom from his base in Donegal to chat about his interest in electronic music, sound design and creating electronic sculptures. Ed Devane, you're very welcome to this South Tip Arts podcast. Your exhibition Presence is currently on display here at the Arts Centre in Clonmel. You're based in Donegal, Ed.
I am.
In a very remote, beautiful part of the country. Maybe firstly, actually, what's it like to work as an artist in that sort of a rural setting? Do you find it isolating, or do you find it quite easy to connect with people through technology and such these days?
Yeah, I mean, before coming to Donegal, I was living in Limerick City, before that Dublin, and I was often sharing studios with people or in very close proximity to them. In a way, it was kind of more of a hindrance than a benefit. Yeah. Not all the time. Obviously, there's benefits to working with groups, but since moving to Donegal, I have a large studio that there's nobody else in the building,
and it's all yours.
Yeah, and and like you say, with technology, it would be a very different story if I didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
But, I never feel like I'm kind of happiest working by myself on the things that I do. I can just concentrate better. It's just a practical thing usually.
I suppose having your own space means that you don't have to kind of put anything away when you finish up at the end of the day. You can kind of leave everything as it was and just come back to it, and nothing's been moved. Everything's where you left it, and you can just pick up where you left off.
That's a double-edged sword, because my studio is in such a mess. I haven't really been working there that much recently. I've kind of last year I renovated a small stone barn beside our house, which would be a chicken shed, and that's where I'm talking to you from right now. So mostly I've been working here when I haven't been away this year. And my studio, as a result, is like a dumping ground for stuff that I can't fit in here. So it's a complete mess. Needs a bit of an overhaul.
It sounds like you're constantly finding bits and pieces and parts of machines or bits of things that you find that you think, oh, I must keep that because it'll be useful.
I used to more than I do now. What's more the case now is with every project that I do, I try to expand the resources I have available to myself. Like a big one last year was getting a welding setup. So now like that takes up a big chunk of my studio, and like I just try and reinvest. I used to do a lot of like skip diving and free cycle, like getting old microwaves and things. But then I ended up with loads of stuff that I had to bring to the recycling center or whatever. It's, and I still have a lot of that, but
so while say your artistic practice is probably your predominant work now, you started off in music production.
Yeah, as a teenager, I played in bands. We never played any gigs or anything, but I was starting from that world, playing guitar and into kind of rock music, and then slowly as I got into electronic music, my interests in how I made music changed to reflect that. And it was also from a kind of a pragmatic point of view to be able to make the music that I wanted to make. I couldn't really rely on my bandmates because they were, I don't know, it was more about drinking than anything, you know.
So was the kind of designing of instruments, did that come out of a direct need to make sounds that you couldn't find? And is that how the sound art thing materialized? Or was there a moment when you discovered a sound artist and you went, oh my God, this is my thing?
No, it was very much an organic kind of process, as you've described, pretty much, because my main focus up until 2010, so like I was 28 then, I'd spent a good 10 years just focused on producing electronic music and releasing records on, very limited sort of basis, but playing gigs and just being immersed in that scene. And while immersed in that scene and kind of hanging out with my contemporaries a lot, I noticed, there's a lot of federalization of equipment, synthesizers and stuff that everyone wants to have.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, that was kind of like, okay, that's something I definitely don't want to have, because I don't want to have the same thing everyone else has.
Yeah.
But then, I was kind of limited by my own limitations of playing instruments and inspired by experimental musicians and just different approaches to taking conventional instruments and doing things to them that you shouldn't, and then recording the results. Like, John Cage's prepared piano, that kind of thing, where he put coins and things between the strings and modified an existing paradigm to make a completely new sound world. And that kind of experimentation led me to realizing that it would be easier to play the modified instruments if I designed it from scratch rather than taking an existing thing. That led me down a rabbit hole of realizing that I didn't really have great woodworking skills or know how to, I'd done a little bit of graphic design in college, but I hadn't done any CAD, computer aided design.
Yeah.
I realized that would be useful, but then I also found this whole fascinating world of people doing stuff with 3D printers and laser cutting and the maker movement. And I guess coming from an electronic music perspective, there's a lot of overlap there with people making their own synthesizers or effects pedals or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Using electronics. So that was always a big interest.
And were you self-taught in all of that? You just sought out that information and learned how to do it?
Pretty much. I did a lot of FOSS courses, like night courses. I figured it was one way of keeping the dole office off my back for the times when I wasn't employed.
Yeah.
To do a course, especially in the computer aided design, because it's really technical, and it was very useful to have somebody actually teach that, whereas some of the other stuff was so specific I couldn't really find a course for it, like audio electronics.
Yeah, you're bringing a whole lot of things together in what you're doing, actually. So like you'd never, I don't think it's so specific that you could never find somebody to kind of teach you all those things at the same time. But the other thing about the show that we have on at the moment, Presence, and your 3 pieces in that all have our motion sensors on them, so that they're controlled by the movement of the viewer. That's a whole nother branch from the instruments altogether. So like, how did the coding part get added into the big mix that it is?
It was a kind of a gradual realization that as I kind of got more proficient with making things out of wood and little bits of metal and things, I kind of figured, okay, that's doable. I can handily enough do that. But to tie it all together with electronics, acoustic instruments, interaction design, basically in that kind of work where the public is an active player in the system, I realized I really needed to know how to bring that all together, and that led me down into the world of Arduino, which is a microcontroller and a programming language. And that was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to learn, actually, because it took years of continual practice. I did a residency in Limerick for a couple of years, and for the first 3 months, I think, I didn't have a studio, so I used that. That was my project. I basically learnt off all the syntax. I wrote out notes. I memorized it. I it was like learning by rote.
Yeah.
It was actually a really beneficial thing to do, because I half knew stuff. I knew enough to find other people's sketches or code and kind of Frankenstein things together, but to actually be able to write your own code is very powerful. But yeah, I always say that to people. I think some people get programming like they get maths really
Yeah,
intuitively, and some people
absolutely. Yeah,
don't.
yeah.
I think I don't. It's just like it
Yeah.
makes my brain hurt.
And I'm
Usually,
fascinated by people who can grasp it really, really quickly.
yeah,
Like it's almost, especially for like somebody with a kind of an artistic vision or mind, it's such a kind of a dry, when you're just looking at the screen and the raw code, it's such a dry thing. But I also think that sort of interaction and the Arduinos and things like that make it so irresistible to the likes of yourself that it's hard to ignore it and it's hard not to want to explore it.
yeah. Well, how Arduino is always kind of touted is as this easy way for artists and designers to use creative code.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a bit of that's underestimating how difficult it can be. And like
Yeah.
you say, how dry it can be. It's really like it's very, very functional. It's very, the nature of programming is it's procedural. So like you're giving it extremely specific sets of instructions that happen in a particular sequence, or else it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you have to rewire how you actually think about how you make things in order to think like how a computer wants to accept the instructions. So it's like the end goal that you want. I think generally, like, because I've taught this sort of stuff in third level, and what's helpful for people is to always have the end goal in mind. What is it you want the thing to do?
Yes.
And then work towards that. Figure out the things, the technologies you need, the code that you need. Like sometimes people don't have a clear idea of what it is they want to do, and then it's really hard because then it's too broad. It's too hard to focus on finding results.
Yeah, I think, you're probably in a very unique position as somebody who does workshops and teaches people about this type of stuff as well, because I suppose it's fair to say that when you're learning coding in a lot of institutions or scenarios, you're not learning it with any artistic sort of framework in your head. Possibly oftentimes the teacher who's teaching to you is a programmer, and doesn't really maybe get what you're trying to express. So that can be kind of difficult. And I think what you said there about being very specific about what it is that you're trying to do is probably a really good starting point for somebody who wants to work with code, who doesn't have an awful lot of experience in it.
Yeah, I mean, I always find that sound is a good medium to teach Arduino, because especially if you're making something that makes a sound, like if the code is wrong, it doesn't make a sound. It's that simple. You can extrapolate that these numbers on the screen are telling an oscillator to vibrate at a certain frequency through a speaker that you can hear and you can feel it. It's kind of a tangible thing, even though sound is kind of intangible, but it's something that you can intuitively get, I think. Anyway, I think it helps.
Sound is so powerful as well, even just, tones and frequencies. And in meditation and all of that world, like frequencies and tones are so important, and, specific frequencies for specific things. And do you think about that type of stuff when you're, making your work? Or
to an extent. I usually, like, sometimes if I'm making a kind of a melodic piece, then I'll take a bit of time in choosing a scale, like a combination of frequencies that well together. But in terms of meditation and that kind of that whole idea of resonance, that each part of your body has a resonant frequency. Haven't really gone down that route too much, because I think it's obviously it's a big thing in computer music or audio installations where it's just the audio. It's not a visual component or a mechanical component like mine often is. I kind of have to often work with the disparity between what I initially imagined and what actually ends up
what's actually possible to produce. Yeah.
Because sometimes things, well, like I'll give you an example. Making mechanisms that try to replicate what the human hand can do is incredibly hard. And I've spent ages doing, kind of practice-based research into making different types of mechanism. that would try to tap things, like a simple enough thing, but you would think, because it's simple to do it with your hand.
Yeah.
Once you try and make a robot do what the human hand can do, it gets very complicated very fast. So you kind of have to deal with the limitations of, and often there's other factors in that as well. So say with making a piece like a commission, I'll have a certain amount of time to do that. I'll have a certain budget to spend on equipment. I have a certain amount of knowledge as to what might work. So that, and that's kind of a design process thing as well, that it's you have all these kind of real world factors that influence the end results of the thing that's been made.
So I was looking at your Soniform website, and people can commission you to work on building them an instrument, I suppose, in the way that you found that, there were certain sounds that you couldn't get with something that was existing already. So you make it yourself. And you've got a couple of things that people can order from you. Do you find like a lot of musicians intrigued by that, something that'll make them a different sound, or ways that they can be encouraged to experiment by using your instruments?
Yeah, I mean, where that all started off was kind of more the custom, like making instruments to order. I never got many of those commissions, and they never really made sense financially, because it always end up taking ages. But what I've kind of refined it down to now is just selling 2 products at the moment. I will add more over time. And I'm actually looking at piles of the magnetic contact mic, because I'm making a batch at the moment.
Right.
And that's really surprised me, actually, because a contact microphone is like kind of it's got a thing called a piezoelectric disc, which is like a vibration sensor, basically. Sometimes they can be used as speakers as well if you kind of wire them up the other way, but they're good at sensing mechanical vibration if they're in contact with something, hence the name contact. But I made for my own experimentation, and as all this stuff comes out of my own practice, if I find it useful, then other people might find it useful.
Are going to find it useful too. Yeah.
Well, sometimes they don't, but this one's really, it's like a little 3D printed case that has a magnet in it that allows you to attach the contact mic onto metal structures, which are, like things like bridges or steel buildings or gates, or things that make a nice resonant sound if you hit them with something, or that are making a sound by themselves, or like a machine or something. And I found a group on Facebook, the Field Recordist group.
Oh,
and I posted something about it, and I got 100 orders in 2 days.
Wow.
And it was like, but it was a really highly specific group of people that are into like sound designers for film and TV, field recordists who just like getting recordings from different perspectives of different places.
Super.
But that's from like people from literally all over the world. Yeah, I've sold to every continent. I think I've sold about 500 of them now. But that's with no advertising other than occasionally putting it up on
word of mouth or whatever.
Facebook. Yeah. So that's really exciting for me to be basically making something in my shed in Donegal, which is pretty remote, and that there's contact mics that are going to, people who are actually making sound for films that I might see. Or
do people ever come back to you with feedback afterwards and let you know what they used it for? And
occasionally people put up videos, and that's kind of a really nice organic marketing thing that I don't have to do anything. If somebody's happy with something and they want to share it on Instagram,
they're going to talk about
depending on who they are, they can, loads of other people can go, oh, I want that. I suppose that works both ways if somebody said something negative, but that hasn't been the case, thankfully. So I like that my work can reach people in places where I probably won't ever go.
So it's important, obviously, especially kind of living where you do in such a rural place, that you have kind of more than one string to your bow, shall we say. So like your instruments, your own artwork, and then you do so many workshops and you work with groups to kind of create sound installations or interactive type workshops where people can share with each other. And you did 2 workshops for us here on the weekend of the Junction Festival, and it was just fascinating to see what you can do with cardboard tube and some staples, and it was quite MacGyver, in that you can kind of use really everyday objects to make sound really effectively.
And that all came out of like the 20 the 2010 recession, being unemployed, being on a community employment scheme called Art Squad in Dublin, and where their focus is kind of community arts and, you know, artists working with different groups in kind of workshop facilitator mode, which I had never done anything like that before. Like I had, you know, kind of anxiety about speaking to groups before that. So like kind of I was encouraged based on what I'd been making by the supervisor to kind of do instrument building workshops, like, and that you know, people will love that. They'll be really successful. And you know, she turned out to be quite right, because that's kind of my, at least half of my income is through workshops of various types.
But there's such a huge element of play to it as well. You know, it's a very playful. Your workshop was very playful. I want to see, like, everybody was down on the ground, kind of on their hands and knees, and you know, it's fun and quite kind of childlike, and like there's so much to discover in everyday objects that you just
I mean, I just want to basically share the simple joy that I get from exploring sound and thinking about sound, or making something from nothing. You know, that's that whole, they vary the workshops they do, but generally speaking, sound is referenced heavily. You know, either it's directly making instruments, or it's making electronics that make sound, or it's learning about code that have a sound element to them. But yeah, like you say, that play element is very important, and just that sort of simple childlike state of just being in the moment and doing something for the fun of it, you know. But then learning from that as well, just kind of.
Absolutely. And you know, that sense of playfulness it comes through in the exhibition that we have on presence downstairs at the moment, because as people come to visit it over the last couple of weeks that it's been on, you will find adults particularly are a little bit more closed in and a little bit more kind of reticent to play with it, or to kind of put their arms up in the air and wave themselves around in front of it. But like the kids come in and they're jumping around, and they're like, I think when people spend time, you can convince an adult to have that moment of interaction and kind of explain to them, well, this is how it works, and you just leave them with it for a minute. They go off with a big smile on their face. Everyone's so self-conscious, I suppose. You know, you suppose everyone's the same, like we're all like that. But you have to move yourself in very specific ways, especially with Presence 2, the one in the alcove. You have to move yourself in very specific ways to get the best out of that.
Yeah, and that was kind of a happy accident, really. Like, I mean, I knew from the start that I wanted there to be one position where the thing would work, but I didn't realize how specific that one position is until I actually set it up. But then it's kind of like, it's an interesting idea about, you know, just trying to control your body to give a result, relinquishing some of that control then by, you know, realizing that you probably can't do it. I mean, my intention is that as well, that people will work collaboratively with each other to try and make something like that work. It's easier if there's 2 or 3 people rather than one. It's possible with one, but it'll be, you know.
It's possible with one. What we've been doing is kind of maybe standing with somebody while they're at it, especially with the large piece, the Presence one inside the front door. Some people walk in and they don't see it actually, which is really another interesting thing. It's that big, I don't know how you could really miss it, but
look up.
They're automatically looking to the walls to see what's going to be on the walls, you know. They don't think to look up, because that space, that double height space is kind of a space that we don't get to use very often. So it's brilliant to see something in it.
Yeah, well, I've done a couple of kind of ceiling hanging pieces. One was in the Wexford County Council office, and it was a Science Gallery commission 2 years ago. And I really enjoyed making that thing that, you know, and it had similar kind of sensors underneath that you'd walk underneath and different parts would sound. And another one that I'd done years ago was kind of more of a light installation. And it you know what it comes from? The Natural History Museum in Dublin has a basking shark, or a whale or something, skeleton that's hanging from the ceiling. And that always fascinated me as a kid. Like, you know, it still does. Like, just how you can walk around underneath something really large and see it from different perspectives. That kind of sculptural side of things, which I'm not trained in at all. Like it's that's purely just, you know, learning from experience. How to go about that, but yeah, I think when I saw the space available in the art center, that immediately decided it for me that I would make a hanging piece. Hanging pieces also have a kind of a practical dimension. I've found that pieces that people interact with directly through touch. I mean, for one thing, apart from the whole COVID situation and people touching things being a bit taboo for a while, you have to make things so robust if people are going to be directly touching them, because people will break stuff, and that's happened to me, and it's been a disaster, you know. So since one particular show, I've tried to make heavy use of sensors that don't involve touch. So that's, you know, it's a practical thing that's kind of guided the direction of the work, but in a positive way, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite interesting seeing people figuring out how to use something like that and then learning how to play it as an instrument. Okay, that's another kind of concept that I like to present to people, is this is a system that works in a way that nobody really understands until they learn it. So everybody's on the same level playing field, so that there's no virtuosos at playing this thing. The whole use of it is learning how to use it and exploring and having fun, and hopefully having mini collaborations with other people, be they people you came to the space with, or randomers that are just there as well and are making a sound with a different part of it, you know. So I think that's kind of a fertile area of work for, you know, I could spend my life making pieces that are operating in a similar vein. Just that simple idea of sharing the joy with people. You know, I get such a buzz from making sound or combining two sounds together. It's something that I've always done, well, since I was a teenager anyway, in improvising music, in making instruments. You know, that moment where you turn a sound into an intentional creative tool that you express something with, you know.
Fantastic. Presence, Ed, the name, what inspired the name of this particular set of work?
Just that idea that without the audience, the work doesn't do anything, or at least it shouldn't. I know it doesn't always work that way.
Well, it loves flies.
Oh, jeez.
Arduinos love flies, because we've had the front doors open because it's been so hot, obviously. So the doors are constantly open, all the doors are open, all the windows are open. So as you can imagine, flies come in and out. So and it's frightened us out of us on a number of occasions, only to discover that there's nobody there.
Yeah, it's just like a little bee buzzing around or something.
So possibly presence of another kind. We don't know.
Well, that's still a present, you know. It's not a complete vacuum. But yeah, that idea that without there being an actor of some sort, like somebody who's bringing some intentionality to the system, like that they're an active player in the system, you know, whether they realize it or not initially. You know, it's kind of in contrast to, say, making something that just plays on a loop or has no interactivity to it. Like a lot of sound installations are just, you know, tape playback kind of thing, just a static, unresponsive system. I want people to enjoy the work in how it looks and how it works, but it's really in the act of playing the system and making it do what it was made to do, and drawing their own conclusions from it, you know, and having their own experience that's different to anybody else's experience in the decisions that they make, the duration that they spend with the piece, the angle they choose to look at it or hear it from, you know, and also the combination of the three pieces that are in the gallery and how they interact with each other and how they interact with the acoustic space. I think that's going to give each listener a different perspective depending on where they are in space and how they move through it, like a simple thing like that. But yeah.
Oh, the other thing is so your workshops and even Soniform, Ed, if people want to get in touch with you about what it is that you're working on, or they're interested in maybe trying out your microphone, or they want to maybe get in touch about having a workshop with you, where can they find you?
My multiple channels available, but the one I usually refer people to is the Instagram. It's ed_Devane, the profile, and then that has a lot of links to my other websites and stuff. I've a website as well, eddevane.com, that has a contact form, and a lot of people contact me through there. That'll get to me. So yeah, any of those things. Sonny Form website as well has a contact form and an ordering
And a shop
ordering form there. So
yeah. Brilliant. Listen, Ed, thanks a million for taking so much time out to talk to me today. I've kept you for far too long, so thank you so much. The work looks great. We're delighted with it, and it's getting really good feedback from the people that are coming in and out to have a look at it. So yeah, all the best going forward, and we hope to see you around again in the future, and we'd love to have you back for more workshops.
Yeah, I really enjoyed those ones that we did, especially the adults one, actually, because I think it was kind of a bit different from what I've done before with adults. I think I was a bit more relaxed about it as well, because sometimes I feel like there's a lot of expectations of being wowed or something,
but it was very informal, and everybody had the chance to sort of ask the questions that, and each of, I suppose they were quite creative people at that adult workshop, so they all probably had their own twist on how they might use some of these techniques, or technologies or whatever. So it was really interesting. Yeah, well done.
Yeah, all right, thanks, Emer.
And thanks so much to Ed for taking the time out to have a chat with me for this episode of the South Tip Arts Podcast. Presence continues here at South Tipperary Arts Centre until August the 20th. It's well worth a viewing and really fun to play with, so do pop in and have a look if you're passing by. If you'd like to get in touch with the podcast, the email address is southtipartspodcast@gmail.com. That's southtipartspodcast@gmail.com. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention that our Artist in Residence programme for 2022 is now accepting applications from artists born or domiciled in Tipperary. You can visit our website www.southtipartcentre.ie to find out all the details, or have a look at any of our social media platforms where you'll be able to find out more information about how to apply. Incidentally, if you would like to sign up for our newsletter, you will also find a means to do that via our Instagram, where if you click in our link in bio, you will find a subscribe button where you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter to stay up to date with everything that's happening here at the Arts Centre. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.